So as you know from the beginning of this service, which was different than the ordinary service, we've entered a new time called, in the religious language, Advent. It is the 4 weeks before we celebrate the mystery of the birth of Jesus. And with the birth of Jesus, with that time and that event, there began the very beginnings of a new age, a new order. An old order began to fall and a new one began to be born. Let me describe for you something of the old age, the old one that's passing away, the part of our world and the time in our world that is gradually slipping away and dying. I will call it, just for this sermon, this is the age, this old age, this is the age of the ego. Or Paul might call it the age of the flesh. By that he means your mind and your emotions, they rule you. This is the age that is dying. The age of the flesh and the age of the ego. It's going away. It still has a hold on me and probably some of you. And let's think about what that looks like. So, for example, I can give you lots of examples about the old age and the old way, the age of the ego, which is still present in me. It looks something like this. When I believe my own personal story, when the whole world revolves around me and my story. So here's some of my stories that I still get wrapped up in. Some of you know I have a couple dogs. One of them is named Butch. He's kind of the church dog. I bring him to church sometimes. He's only peed on the floor once. I won't tell you where that was, but I picked that up. Butch is a very simple dog. Not complicated. Some animals are complicated, complex personalities. Cats, they're terribly complicated. Who can understand a cat? Butch is very simple. He likes to play with his red rubber ball called a conga, I think, and it's a very hard rubber ball. He's very simple. What he wants to do in life is to eat, sleep, and play with his ball. The game he plays is this. I throw the ball, he catches it. We can do that a long time. He's very adept at catching balls. So he'll come to the chair. It's fine when you're outside. It gets a little trickier when you're in the house. And because I spoil my dog, we play red rubber ball catch in the house on occasion. I'll sit in my chair. He'll bring the ball to me. I'll throw it in the air. He'll catch it. This can go on for hours. But on a couple occasions, Butch will not catch the ball. The ball will bounce off of his mouth, and he's very intense about this. So when he lunges for the ball and he misses the ball can fire off in any direction, including towards lamps and other living beings in the house like me. So I threw him the ball, assuming he was going to catch it. This is like on a Saturday morning. I'm in my little bathrobe, sitting on the chair, drinking my coffee. I throw the ball to Butch, and the ball fires back and hits me in the mouth. Because I still sometimes am not living by the presence of God, but by my own ego and my own flesh. That's my mind and my emotions. My first reaction is to say, Butch, what the heck is wrong with you, you stupid dog? Catch the ball. Not whack me with it. But fortunately, my family, my partner was in the chair next to me, and she says, don't you yell at that dog. That's life in the old world, living by the old man or the old creation, where you're ruled by your ego or by your flesh. Sometimes, another example of what it means to live according to their story. You know, my story was, Butch, you dumb dog, why did you hurl that ball at my face? When you're living by your story, you are not living in the new age. Occasionally, I actually go out in my yard and take care of it every once in a while. The neighbors wish I would take care of it a little more often. So I keep getting those little notes in my box from the HOA saying, please, would you harvest the grass that's growing in your front yard? And would you cut down some of those things that you call hedges? So I was out cutting the hedges down. And I've got those electric clippers. Kind of the kind that is still attached to the cord. So I drag the cord around through all the hedges. And I can't quite get to the end of the hedge with the length of cord. So I'm reaching with the thing to cut the spiky thing, and the cord is stuck. So I keep pulling on the cord. I can almost get to the last sprouty thing that looks like, Medusa off the bush. So I get to the thing, and I pull on the cord one more time, and I go back to pull it, and the branch whacks me in the face because I had pulled on the branch. Now, because I live in the old age sometime, I still live under the order of the ego and my own flesh. I can actually get mad at the bush for hitting me. I can get mad at a dog. I can get mad at a bush. So I take up my clippers, I go back to that branch. I will teach you a lesson, young man. I guess you will not bother me anymore. Sometimes, like this happened just the other day, recently, I have one of those coffee makers in your house. The fancy kind that makes 1 cup at a time, called the Keurig. It's got little cups, K-cups. Because we're so environmentally sensitive, we decided not to use the plastic cup, but to refill the ones in the basket that you put the basket in, which means you got to put coffee in the basket every morning. Most mornings goes right in. I have my spoon, I go down into my super fancy coffee bag, and I put it in the K-cup, and I close the lid, and I put it in the machine. On this occasion, unbelievably, the cup decided to jump out of my hand. So that I took my spoonful of coffee and poured it on the counter. I can even get mad at inanimate coffee. Coffee, plants, animals, they're all out to get me, personally. When we live under the tyranny of the old age, of the ego, it's all about us. My dog, my plants, my coffee, it's my story. And we're so into it, as if my story was the whole universe. That's when you know you're living in the old age. So, we're also enslaved and under the bondage of our own little ego and our flesh when we really identify with and draw our sense of being from our labels, the things that label us. Most of those labels are just on the surface, the outward sign of things. But as people in the old age, that's who we are. So for instance, here, you know the list of labels, you could go on forever. But one of them would be this: I am an American. That defines who I am. And America is great, and America is the best, and anybody who thinks otherwise is itching for a fight. And it turns into a kind of patriotism where I have to put down the other country to enhance my own. I've got to defend the honor of my country because my country is more important than anybody else's country. Of course, it's not just nationalism that's part of the egoic system. I also belong to a certain culture. Not just my nation, but my culture. Examples of culture would be tons of them. There's so many subcultures in America. Like, you can belong to the Texan culture. I'm not Texan, but I got here as soon as I could. Right? That means you belong to the Texan culture. And not only am I an American, but I'm a Texan American. Which means I have to be somewhat better than the people who live in the Northeast, who belong to the New England culture. which is different than the Southern culture. You live in the South? Well, that's my heritage. I'm proud of my heritage because I'm from the South. As if that meant something special. But you're not a Texan, you're not a New Englander, you're a Southerner. Well, isn't that special? God forbid you be born in the Northwest where they drink Starbucks and chase Bigfoot around the countryside. Or you're not from California where everyone drives a Prius and eats green things. Right? When we identify ourselves with our labels, but our country or our part of the country, you know the new age has not been born in you. That's just the surface of who you are. That's looking at the outward things. Not to mention the labels that go with our race. Well, I'm a white guy. Well, I'm a black guy. Well, I'm a Hispanic person. Well, I'm an Asian person. Well, I'm a Native American person. All of them labels that define who we are. It's just about the millimeter of your skin. Whenever we're defined by our race or our nation or our culture, and that's what we really think we are. That's part of an old age that is going to pass away. I've been reading a history book about early American history. And we were settled by lots of different people. Some people came here for money, to find gold and resources to take back to England. Some came here because they were starting a new company, like the company in England coming to expand their resources here in America. Some people came for religious freedom, like the Puritans. Thanksgiving, we just did that, right? They came running away from the persecution in England by the Anglican Church so that they could come to America and persecute everyone who wasn't a Puritan. And of course, when you got to be the Puritan, if you weren't a Puritan, don't live in Massachusetts or Plymouth because you will be in big trouble. I mean, huge trouble. If you don't go to church on Sunday, you know what happens? They say, you should have been here at church on Sunday. I think you need to be whipped. That's what they did. Persecute everybody who wasn't Puritan. So, the United States was begun with all kinds of sectarian divisions, meaning denominations. Puritans, Quakers, Catholics, Anglicans in Virginia. If you didn't baptize your kid in Virginia in the Episcopal Church, the Church of England, well then you lost all kinds of rights and privileges. If you weren't baptized in the Virginia colony as an Anglican, then you lost out. So, when we identify ourselves as Anglicans or Congregationalists or Lutherans or Presbyterians or Quakers, Catholics, if that's your identity, you're still living in the old age. You identify with your label. And the hard thing is, when it comes to labels, we really get pretty upset to defend our label. As an American, as an Episcopalian, gosh, as a white person, a black person, as a Southerner, as a Northerner. And life gets really ugly. And it creates great suffering. So in the first half, when we identify with our story, I create great suffering for myself primarily. Of course, the coffee understands my wrath, so does the dog, and so does the plant. But when we identify with our labels, now we have great suffering when people who don't belong to our group have to be attacked or belittled or defended, or whether it's your nation or your color or your culture. The world living under that old way of seeing ourselves, that old age, has great suffering in it. Jesus initiates, inaugurates, starts a new age. The birth of Jesus begins turning the page in the chapter of humanity, where he comes and says his primary identity is who he is in God. He is the Son of God. That's his primary identity. When people understand themselves not as their own little story about their day, not as their own label, when they identify themselves as children of God, people born of the Spirit, that is the name for the next age. If the first age is the age of the ego, the next one is the age of the Spirit, or the age of divine presence within each person. When that age begins, as it did with Jesus, and we follow in his footsteps, then we're not identified with our little stories. We're not identified with our external labels. We are identified with the divine, with the Spirit, with God. Then I can accept what happens to me, because my personal identity is not on the line when I spill the coffee. I can accept what's happening when the dog whacks me with the ball. I don't have to defend myself. When the bush whacks me in the face, it's not a personal affront to my personhood. When I see other people who are not from my tribe of white, Texan, American, Prius-driving, green-eating people, I don't have to defend myself. I don't have to strike out against them, because that's not really who I am. And it's not who the people are around me. People around me are made in the image of God. They bear the Spirit of God. They are children of God. So I don't have to defend anything. The suffering in the world goes down. The joy in the world arises. In the new age, so much suffering will go away, because we're not identified with our ego, but identified with God in the new age. Suffering decreases, joy increases. It'll be a new age. It'll be a new world. It'll be a new beginning for humanity. And it's begun in Jesus when he's born on Christmas, as we celebrate. And it's begun in us as we become his disciples, as we become followers of his way. His way is not identified with our little stories. His way is not identified with our little labels. His way is knowing who we are in God, in the Spirit, dwelling in us. And a new age will begin. It's in process now. It's not quite done yet. But it will be an age with so much less suffering for humanity. So much more joy for everyone. May the new age begin in you. And you show forth God's glory among the nations. When will this happen? When will we beat our swords into plowshares? When will we beat our spears into pruning hooks? When will nation not lift up sword against nation? When will they not learn war anymore? When will they walk in the light of the Lord? It's when we shift from the old age of ego to the new age of Spirit. I offer this to you in God's name, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.